between, so I'm trying to reconnect. Yeah. So thank you, and thank you, Sarbiji, for your insightful sessions. And now we are heading to the second segment of the session, where uh, Dr. Jayaraman will be joining us to share his thoughts on traditional Sanskrit commentaries in fathoming Yoga Sutras, exploration and insights from the text. So we all know that Rishi Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is the foundational text on yoga. There are just 196 sutras, but each of them is equally deep and philosophical as in scripture. In yesterday's session, Dr. Sakrikar also focused on that, and we tried to dwell deeper into it. Swami Vivekananda describes Yoga Sutra as something that will take us beyond the world. He says, "Thou art our Father, and will take us to the other shore of this ocean of ignorance." So no wonder Yoga Sutra has attracted many scholars to interpret the sutras and unravel the secret of samadhi. Several traditional Sanskrit commentaries are available to understand and to decode or to interpret these Yoga Sutras. To discuss the importance and relevance of traditional Sanskrit commentaries and how one can explore them and derive insights for further research, we have Dr. M. Jayaraman to guide us. Dr. Jayaraman Mahadevan holds a PhD in Sanskrit from University of Madras with gold medal and first rank both in his undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. He works in the research department of Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, Bangalore since 2010. His work in the field of textual aspects of yoga involves editing, translating, and disseminating inputs from traditional Sanskrit literature on yoga. Thus far, he has worked on 12 books on yoga and equal number of peer-reviewed journal articles on yoga. He also works towards developing the immersive learning methods of yoga text. Yoga Bhashya, a four-part self-learning material on Sanskrit and yoga, Yoga Vaisharadi, a searchable web repository on classical text of yoga, are a few of his noteworthy contributions in the recent time. I welcome Dr. Jayaraman Mahadevan and invite him to deliver his talk.
Yeah. Namaste. I would like to commence with a short invocation to Sage Patanjali. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi. Good morning to all in India and namaste to all worldwide. uh, I, at the outset, would like to thank Ashish Pandeji for the opportunity and the invitation, and also, yeah, Mr. Ajinkya for the introduction. Before I just share my screen with the slides, I would just like to contrast the session that you're going to, or the aspects that you're going to hear from me, with the one that just got over from Professor Kalsaji. That was a completely scientific talk, full of empirical research and evidences and research papers. And this will be the other side of yoga research. So these back-to-back sessions in a way beautifully brings out the dimensions of yoga, the possibilities of yoga. So both in the scientific realm and also in the textual and philosophical realm. So research in yoga, study in yoga is possible. So there is a theory called unity of knowledge, which tries to combine the sciences with philosophy. So there is a natural marriage of sciences and philosophy in yoga already. So that is my initial observation, and this is what you will expect now. That is, in this session, there will be talk on textual aspects of yoga, especially on the commentary literature of the Yoga Sutra. Now I will share my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Yeah. So um, the topic that I'll be discussing here is traditional commentaries in Fathoming Yoga Sutras, explorations and insights. So I just heard that this topic has already been touched upon in yesterday's session. Let me see how far I'm able to, but I was not in the yesterday's session, but let me try to present those aspects from traditional commentaries that have come to my based on my observations of the study of them in the past decade. So I'll just present the points that I'm going to touch upon briefly. First one, as you just saw in the previous session, yoga is all about doing, kriya, action. What is there to study? Is there a role of textual study or swadhyaya in yoga? So that will be the first point. Second one is the richness of yoga commentary literature, or richness of literature to study in yoga, especially the commentaries of Yoga Sutra. Then the third point will be much more the why of it. Why we should study, or what is the importance of studying the commentary literature. That too, if approaching Yoga Sutras and the tradition of yoga itself without the commentary literature, what would be the problems? I'll just be highlighting only a couple of problems. And then advantages of approaching the yoga tradition and also Yoga Sutras, especially with the commentaries. So what are the 10 advantages? I will not be, I don't think I will have enough time to elaborate upon it, but I will just hint a couple with examples of those 10 points. And then what is the current situation in the study of Yoga Sutra literature, especially the commentaries, and what is the desideratum, what needs to be done. And then finally, some useful leads, studies and references. So this summarizes, or this is the structure of my talk. Now let's get into the first aspect. So as we see that yoga is all that we practice related to the body, mind. So what is the role of study of literature or study of yoga texts? We see that Swadhyaya itself is a yogic tool. Uh, uh, we see that in the Yoga Sutras, in various places, the term Swadhyaya appears as part of Kriya Yoga and also as part of Ashtanga Yoga. We have the term Swadhyaya. There, Swadhyaya is explained by the commentators as Pranavadi Mantra Japaha Moksha Shastra Adhyayanam Va. So it is the repetition of mantras like Pranava, which is denoted by the term Swadhyaya, or Moksha Shastra Adhyayanam, study of text, study of literature. So that is also a component, a tool of yoga itself. So tapas Swadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. As part of Kriya Yoga, Swadhyaya is there. And later also, as part of Yama Niyamas also, Swadhyaya is there. Now emphasizing the connection between, especially yoga as a whole and Swadhyaya, Vyasacharya, the commentator of the primary commentator of Yoga Sutra, he says, Swadhyayad yogamasita, yogat swadhyaya mamanet, swadhyaya yoga sanyuktya, paramatma prakashate. So here we see that yoga as a practice and swadhyaya as learning. So transformation, yoga is for transformation. So if transformation has to happen, that happens by practices like asana, pranayama, and also a transformation at the level of the mind by study. So the text, the verse says, so do yoga with swadhyaya, and then do with swadhyaya also incorporate yoga, also incorporate practice. Mere knowledge, no practice, also is of not much of help, and mere practice without knowledge also might not help. So that beautiful balance of swadhyaya and yoga, study and also practice, it has been emphasized by Vyasa, one of the principal commentator to Yoga Sutra. So with this note, so we see the importance of the study of literature, study of texts, the need to understand. As we practice yoga, we also need to be mindful. We need to understand to transform. So towards this study, towards enriching ourselves along with the practice, a lot of the literature of yoga is very rich. Especially in the, so many texts, so many kinds of texts are there in yoga. Some are in the form of verses, sutras, prose, so many patterns or so many formats of texts are there. But here I'm just, as part of this talk, I'll be focusing only on the commentary literature on the Yoga Sutras alone. That itself is again a very vast literature. It's a continuous literature for at least 1500, 1700 years of literature of commentary literature on Yoga Sutra exists. So towards strengthening the Swadhyaya component in along with the yoga, we have such strong or rich resources. So the first set of commentaries we can see is Sage Vyasa's commentary. About Sage Vyasa's commentary, some say it is some Vyasa Muni. There are papers or there are certain analysis which says it is Vindhya Vasa and not Veda Vyasa. And then others say that both the sutra, Yoga Sutra and the commentary are by the same person. So there are multiple views. But Vachaspati Mishra, one of the earliest sub-commentators to Vyasa's commentary, says that this is from Vyasa himself. So that is one textual source. So the principal commentary of Vyasa is there, and on that Vyasa's commentary, so which is dated very closer to the Yoga Sutras themselves. So that is in the beginning of the Common Era, is where in the beginning couple of centuries of Common Era is where Yoga Sutras are placed, and Vyasa's commentary is also very closer to, or placed very closer to Yoga Sutras themselves. And on that Vyasa's commentary, there are so many sub-commentaries to explain the import, the essence of Vyasa's commentary, like Tattva Vaisharadi of Vachaspati Mishra. Then upon Tattva Vaisharadi, there are a couple of commentaries, and then Vivarana of Shankara. Some say it is Adi Shankara, and certain scholars, they say that it is a different Shankara of 13th century. And then there is Vartika of Vijnana Bhikshu, Bhaswati of Hariharananda Aranya. So Vyasa's principal commentary, and then the set of sub-commentaries and the tikas upon it is one set of commentaries to Yoga Sutra. Again, there are again a set of independent commentaries also on Yoga Sutra directly. So the previous list was centered on Vyasa's commentary and its sub-commentaries. Directly on Yoga Sutra also, there are so many independent Samskrita commentaries. So earliest of the commentaries that is available is Raja Martanda by Bhoja, then Maniprabha, Pradipika, and then two commentaries by Narayana Tirtha, and again two commentaries by Nagoji Bhatta on self same Yoga Sutra. So, and then Yoga Sudhakara by Sadashivendra Saraswati, and then Yoga Chandrika of Anantadeva Pandita. It goes on. There is a big list of commentaries. So I have just quoted a few. The Encyclopedia of Indian Philosophy, which is a very good book of introduction on Yoga Sutra, Yoga philosophy, and the entire tradition of yoga. So it mentions some 28 commentaries on Yoga Sutras alone. So this is the richness of the commentary literature. So initially we saw the importance of Swadhyaya, and now the resource for Swadhyaya is quite rich. Only when we focus, the focus is only on the Yoga Sutras and its commentary literature. So now, Yes, of course, Vyasa has mentioned that Swadhyaya is important. Now let us see from our current perspective uh, the why of study of the commentaries in our current day world. So why we need, and what might be the problems if we sometimes approach the Yoga Sutras without the commentaries, especially the traditional Sanskrita commentaries. I'm just highlighting only a couple of problems. So it has implications in both understanding the Yoga Sutras themselves, and it has implications in understanding or in the yoga history also. From the point of view of yogic history also, there will be certain problems if we approach the Yoga Sutras or yoga tradition without the support or inputs from the uh, commentary literature. Now, the first point is fancifulness. So there is an accusation that, or there is a claim, or there are observations by scholars stating that directly, without the basis of Samskrita grammar or the tradition, directly looking at the terse sutras and directly commenting upon them sometimes might lead to fanciful interpretations. Especially George Feuerstein in 1989 in his book The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, he himself has attempted a commentary on Yoga Sutras. There he says, especially on a particular sutra, that is Prayatna Shaithilya Ananta Samapattibhyam, second chapter 47th sutra, he notes that all kinds of fanciful explanations have been proposed for this aphorism. And it seems his observation is right. Uh, and so this sutra, which upon which he says there exists so many fanciful explanation, is a very critical sutra. So it is a sutra that comes just after Sthira Sukham Asanam. Asana, from the therapeutic perspective, is a very important tool of yoga. And then this sutra 2.47 is a sutra that emphasizes, or in which sage Patanjali mentions two techniques by which asana has to be done: Prayatna Shaithilya and Ananta Samapatti. So Prayatna Shaithilya Ananta Samapatti Bhyam Sthira Sukham Asanam. Asana becomes sthira and sukha by Prayatna Shaithilya and by Ananta Samapatti. So it is on this sutra, Feuerstein observes that fanciful explanations have been proposed. So now, even in that also, there are two techniques, Prayatna Shaithilya and Ananta Samapatti. I just focus upon one aspect of it. So, Prayatna Shaithilya, a general translation of the term Prayatna Shaithilya, the technique Prayatna Shaithilya would be slackening of effort. So by slackening of effort, asana becomes sthira and sukha. Sthira sukha, sthiratva and sukha in asana comes by slackening of effort. So normally, if we just look at the sutra in the surface level, or the words at the level of the words themselves, it is quite possible to see that there is a bit of difficulty to understand. So how come by slackening effort sthiratva and sukha is achieved normally in our activities of life? So to attain some kind of success, some steadiness, we put in more effort. So to achieve something in life, we cannot slacken effort, we need to put in more effort. So probably this apparent kind of confusion that arises, or enigma that arises in the mind, might explain the various fanciful explanations that George Feuerstein indicates. So I'm just pointing out to one such attempt to explain. This is a very famous book by Edwin Bryant, which claims that it has insights from the traditional commentaries themselves. So there we see how this technique of Prayatna Shaithilya, which is very critical to the practice of asana. If Sthira and Sukha are the characteristics of asana, only when Sthira and Sukha is achieved in the asana, the desired benefits in asana can be seen. So towards that, Prayatna Shaithilya is the technique. So that is being presented here. So Bryant quotes or states that Hariharananda elaborates that the practice of asana involves a level of pain at first. After a time, this disappears by complete relaxation, Shaithilya, into the pose. And it continues about the second technique, Ananta Samapatti. So, slackening of effort. He quotes Hariharananda Aranya to state that this is what is meant by Prayatna Shaithilya. So initially when we try to do asana, there will be pain in the body. Later, after some time, as we get used to asana, then the relaxation happens on its own. It is so. If this is the interpretation intended, then this would not differentiate yoga or yogasana especially from any other physical activity. So jogging or any other physical activity or aerobics, initially when we try, of course there will be certain level of pain at the first. After a time, gradually we get used to it and then we relax into the practice. So then what is the newness or what is the uniqueness or what is the technique aspect of it? So Patanjali is very specific in saying that these two are the techniques. By Prayatna Shaithilya and Ananta Samapatti, there is a instrumental case there. So Tritiya Vibhakti Dvivachana. By the techniques of Prayatna Shaithilya and Ananta Samapatti, Sthiratva and Sukha in asana will be achieved. Now, if we go by this interpretation, what is the technique there? So this might be one of the problems which are actually, this text has come later to what George Feuerstein has said. Probably there were other interpretations also like this, which George Feuerstein saw. So this was one kind of such category of interpretation that we can see, which may not exactly convey. Though he says he's quoting from Hariharananda Aranya, the 20th century commentator. He's a Samskrita commentator. So this is one problem. Now, what exactly, or what is the input that we gain from the commentary literature that I showed in the previous slides is we see that the term Prayatna Shaithilya, when studying some 15 and odd commentaries of Yoga Sutra, we see that there is rich, useful, very practical, pervasive explanation. That is pervasive in the sense, in the practice of asana, it is complete from the beginning to the end. How this Prayatna Shaithilya technique can be applied. So that comes out when we look into the commentary literature. There are three sets of views. Now, slackening of the effort, if we translate Prayatna Shaithilya as slackening of the effort, Prayatna Shaithilya, so set of commentators like Vijnana Bhikshu and others, they interpret Prayatna Shaithilya as Bahuvyapara Nivaranam. So Prayatna is Bahuvyapara and Shaithilya is Nivaranam. So before the practice of asana, it is advised that one should not get involved in excessive tiring physical activity. So there should be a relaxation at the beginning. That is, one should not have done or climbed some 4 floors to reach the yoga studio and immediately start the yoga practice. No. So the physical fatigue, if it is there before the asana practice, then that will not lead to sthira and sukha. So just before the practice of asana, prayatna should be slackened. Prayatna here is other strenuous physical activities should be avoided before the starting of asana practice. So that is Prayatna Shaithilya before the start of asana. That comes out from the interpretation of a couple of commentators like Vijnana Bhikshu. And then this Prayatna Shaithilya is presented by the commentators as an activity even during the, or as a technique to be applied even during the practice of asana. So Vachaspati Mishra, Hariharananda Aranya, which was misquoted by the previous reference that I gave, what exactly Hariharananda Aranya and Sadashiva Brahmendra and Vachaspati Mishra, what do they say? So they say that Samsiddhika Prayatna Shaithilyam, Samsiddhika Prayatna Shaithilyam and Anya Prayatna Shaithilyam. So what does this mean? Samsiddhika. Samsiddhika means casual or natural effort. For example, you are sitting at your own places and listening to this talk, or you are participating in this conference. So are you aware of how you are sitting? No. It is quite natural. We are just sitting as we are. So Vachaspati Mishra says, Prayatna here refers to Samsiddhika Prayatna, the casual or the unmindful. Shaithilyam, relaxation. So the unmindful, casual effort should be avoided during the practice of asana, which means one should be mindful of the steps that are prescribed to do any given asana. That is keeping the back erect, keeping the shoulders relaxed, and then chin down. If you are doing some Padmasana or any other seated posture, eyes closed. So all these are the steps or various, for each and every asana, there is a set of instruction. So they have to be meticulously followed. That is what is intended by Prayatna Shaithilya according to the interpretation of Vachaspati Mishra. So avoiding casual effort and then following the instruction. So slackening of casualness in effort. So that happens during the practice. And Hariharananda Aranya says Anya Prayatna Shaithilyam. That is, when we are into the practice of asana, we should be focused only on the steps of asana, and the eyes or our in the middle, getting up, going away, or turning off the light, or avoiding other external activity. Anya Prayatna. So intrusion. So avoiding intrusion into effort. So that is Prayatna Shaithilya according to Hariharananda Aranya, which happens during. So this technique of Prayatna Shaithilya happens during the practice of asana. Again, by going by the another set of commentators. Now finally, Prayatna Shaithilya is a technique that is also needed after reaching a particular configuration of asana, say Padmasana or Navasana, whatever asana. After reaching the posture, what should one do? Shankara in the Vivarana commentary says, Asana bandhottara kalam prayatna karanam, which is after assuming the particular posture, prayatna should be stopped. That is, all the efforts towards achieving that asana position has to be done. Once that position is reached, any further prayatna has to be avoided. So that is Prayatna Shaithilya after reaching the asana position. So thus we see that before commencing of asana, there is Prayatna Shaithilya, and during the practice of asana, there is Prayatna Shaithilya. That is, before commencing, avoiding strenuous activities, strenuous physical activities. During the practice, being mindful about the steps and being focused in our effort in following the steps. And on reaching the asana position, mindfully keeping the body still. That is also Prayatna Shaithilya. Thus, this is the richness. So whereas when we compare the previous interpretation that you do yoga for certain times, or initially it will be painful and then later the pain will go away, you will ease into the practice. When we compare and contrast, we know the richness of input from the commentary literature. So this can be summarized. So I actually wrote, this was my first paper in on Yoga Sutra commentary comparative literature, where we see that before I developed this flowchart, which will be useful for any asana practice. So avoid strenuous. Actually, Vyasa in his commentary just says only one word about Prayatna Shaithilya, the principal commentator. By incorporating the technique of Prayatna Shaithilya, Anga Mejaya will be avoided. Anga Mejaya, Anga is limbs, Mejaya or aged kampane, to shake or tremble. So Prayatna, Vyasa's framework is do or incorporate the technique of Prayatna Shaithilya. It will help avoid trembling of limbs. That will lead to the definition of asana, that is Sthira Sukham. So when we see here that before the practice of asana, avoid strenuous work, then the trembling of the body is avoided, and then which is naturally results in stability and comfort. We can also generally feel if we carry some weight, some 10 kilos or 20 kilos of weight, and then ask the person to say namaste, his hands will tremble. Whereas if there is no such strain, there will be no trembling. So avoiding strenuousness through avoiding Angamejaya leads to Sthira Sukha. Again, practicing with full focus, not getting diverted, distracted, and following all the steps prescribed. So the mind is not moving here and there, neither is the effort casual. So there is no, again, trembling or instability in practice, which will finally result in Sthira Sukha. And at the end also, when we finally reach the posture, there also we should we can see that it's practical that when there is a body movement in all yoga sessions, there is a tendency to keep the body moving from, though it is a Surya Namaskara, we keep moving the body from one asana to the other asana. Especially Krishnamacharya, Deshikacharya, in our tradition, they say there needs to be a slight pause in between every movement. Only then it becomes yoga, or else it is just a flow. It's again it promotes rajas. So here, this is actually according to the Prayatna Shaithilya principle given by Shankara's interpretation. So after reaching every asana, experience the stillness. Do Prayatna Shaithilya, shaking of the body is avoided, and that is where we experience the Sthiratva and Sukha. So thus, when we consult the commentaries, we see the advantages. So, and we see that this becomes a pervasive technique. So Patanjali says this is a technique to practice of asana. The commentators have exploited or fully explored all the possibilities of Prayatna Shaithilya during the practice of asana. So thus we see the advantage of commenting or looking at the commentary literature. So first point is the advantage from the first point is it is not fanciful. Prayatna Shaithilya, that meaning is not compromised, is within the grammatical framework. Whereas when we see the commentary that I quoted, where is Prayatna Shaithilya as a technique? So it's a third case dual. As a technique, how can it be incorporated? That is not answered by Bryant's interpretation or Bryant's statement. Whereas in each of the interpretation given by the commentators, fancifulness is avoided by sticking to the grammatical Tritiya Vibhakti Dvivachana. That is, instrumental case is followed, and it is presented as a thorough technique, pervasive technique. And we see that normally one accusation against the commentaries is that there is always debate and there is always khandana and mandana. One contradicts the other. But this is a classical example as to how the commentaries are complementary to each other and makes a very crucial technique, a pervasive technique, very useful, very systematic, and it exploits or it explores the entire spectrum of possibility of the technique of Prayatna Shaithilya. And then of course, and another normal point that comes to textual studies, oh, you will speak some philosophy which is not practical, and I hope this question is cannot raise about the practicability or of this technique as explained by the commentators. So it's also very practical, and it's the inputs from the commentaries that we see here is not on some prakriti, purusha, tattva, consciousness. Yes, of course we get all those inputs on these very crucial techniques of asana practice, which has very direct implications. So the lots of research, empirical research is being conducted, but are they based on these inputs? So that becomes the question. If these inputs are to what extent have they been incorporated in those the empirical research on asana or yoga that happens? So there is a lot of possibilities when when these two disciplines sit together, or these two researchers, these two kinds of researchers sit together, the outcomes, the benefits for the society will be more, or the approach and reach of yoga will be further deepened when the theoretical, textual, and the practical or empirical aspects of research of yoga go together, respect each other. So we see the advantages. This is one example. And this is about understanding Yoga Sutra, and that to a crucial technique of Prayatna Shaithilya, how the commentators are very resourceful. And this was on the Yoga Sutra itself. Now, the utility or the importance of the commentaries in the context of history of yoga itself, that's another point. If again, if those commentaries, views in the commentaries are not consulted, how the history of yoga itself may be wrongly construed, which may lead to wrong conclusions about the history of yoga, is another point that I wanted to present. So there was this conference, World Sanskrit Conference, that keeps happening every 3 years or 4 years. One happened in 2018. There was a talk by a scholar on yoga to mortify or to cultivate the body. So what is yoga for? Is it for mortification or torturing the body, or is it to cultivate the body? So we don't find I was in the talk, I presented, I had a paper in the conference, so I had the chance of listening to the lecture in person, but strangely I don't have any links to provide because the link to the video is not found anywhere in the web. So there, in announcing the lecture, we see this description, how this tradition changed from being a practice meant for world renouncing, self-mortifying ascetics to one for people in the world who wish to cultivate their bodies while pursuing yoga's religious ends. So this summarizes the talk, and I also listened that the talk's approach was also like this. Another note about this talk says, Indian yogis of old undertook yoga as a practice of severe austerity. They mortified their bodies through fasting, extreme breath control, and penances. It was only when the first texts of Hatha Yoga began to appear around 1,000 years ago that the promise of physical benefits of yoga can be made. So this summarizes the essence of the talk, and the 90% or 99% of the talk was focused on how yoga is a self-mortifying practice. How yoga was equated to tapas. Tapas, one of the interpretations of tapas, generally if you consult any dictionary, you will see kaya shoshanam, that is draining this body or scorching this body. Tapasantape, they take that interpretation and try to equate tapas with yoga to self-mortification. So the whole claim here is that yoga in the beginning began as a self-mortifying practice, and its physical benefit aspect of it came only later. So this is the point that is mentioned, but how far this is the point about history of yoga that is being mentioned here. So when we consult the commentaries, so what do the commentaries say? But before going into the commentaries, the word tapas, which was taken as the pivotal or central aspect. In Yoga Sutra also the word tapas is there. Tapas swadhyaya ishvara pranidhanani kriya yoga. So there also the term tapas is there. Tapas was equated to self-mortification. So in early sources of yoga and early traditions of yoga, it was all about self-mortification. The word tapas was always connected to torturing oneself. That was the claim. Whereas when we see right in the Taittiriya Aranyaka, in the Vedic literature itself, we see Ritantapas, Satyantapas, Shrutantapas, Shantantapo, Damastapas, Shamastapo, Dhanantapo, Yajnantapo, Bhurbhuvassu Varbrahmhaitadupasyaitattapaha. It is not self-mortifying practice which is equated as tapas. It is shantam tapaha. Tapaha which leads to shanti. Shrutam. Tapaha is shrutam, learning. Tapaha, damas tapaha, control of the senses is tapaha. Shamaha, calmness of the mind is tapaha. So the very ancient references to tapas is not connected to kaya shoshanam. It is rather those practices which lead to peace. So this is from the Vedic literature, but the focus here is the commentary literature of Yoga Sutra. As I mentioned, Vyasa's commentary is the oldest commentary to Yoga Sutra, and which is almost contemporary to Yoga Sutras themselves, according to the views of scholars. So how does Vyasa treat tapas? He says, as part of the Kriya Yoga Sutra, he says, Na tapasvino yogaha siddhyati. A person who is not a tapasvi, for him, he will not be able to succeed in yoga. Ashuddhihi nantarena tapaha sambhedam apadyate iti tapasaha upadanam. Ashuddhi, impurities in the body or impurity in the whole system cannot be removed without tapas, and hence tapas is a very important component for yoga. So this is about the importance of tapas. But how should that tapas be done? Is it self-mortification? To that question, Vyasa very categorically, very clearly says, Tacha chitta prasadanam abadhamanam anena asevyam iti manyate. Here it's very clearly said that tapas should be done. Tapas should be done to remove impurities, but in that process, the chitta prasada or chitta prasadanam, the calmness or the pleasantness of the mind should not be hampered. So, mortification and chitta prasadanam cannot go together. So if one is mortifying oneself, torturing oneself, where will be pleasantness of mind? So this very original quotation, very old quotation from the Vyasa's commentary, which is closer to Yoga Sutras themselves, says that tapas is mere disciplining of the body and not mortification of the body. Of course, fasting and other practices are there, but they have to be done in such a manner that they don't torture the body and have a negative impact on the mind. So thus we see the claim that yoga was initially a self-mortifying practice. Its therapeutic benefits, its calming effects, and its healing ideas came only later. So this claim becomes falsified. So we will be able to write the history of yoga properly only when and we will also be able to appropriately respond to wrong theories, wrong propositions that initially it was barbaric or mortifying or crude and refinement emerged later. No, it is refinement earlier and it is much more refinement now, or refinement according to the contemporary requirements now. So this is how the history of yoga should be put, and that input, that idea comes only when we comment or only when we look into the rich commentary literature. So these are the two whys of the commentary literature that I wanted to present. And again, I had an opportunity to present a talk in the Kanchipuram University where I listed out 10 benefits. So the 2 points that I presented was to overcome problems. Here the next 10 points I'll be just mentioning. I don't think I have time to elaborate. Maybe in the course of question and answers I can present it. So the 10 positive advantages in going or fathoming, the word fathoming is used in the title. So how can we fathom, or how can we delve deeper into Yoga Sutra literature and expand our understanding better? So some 10, at least 10. I just consulted the sutras pertaining to Ashtanga Yoga in that paper that I presented in 2019. I just consulted Vyasa Bhashya and then the sutras connected to the Ashtanga Yoga alone. So by studying that, I just drew out 10 benefits of studying the commentary literature. I'm just mentioning it. Nishkrishtata, preciseness, Gauna Mukhyatva Avagati, clarity on the main and subordinate concepts, Loka Drishti Nivrittihi, Shastra Drishti Adhanam, removing general perception and conveying the technical contextual understanding. All this comes by looking at the commentaries. Kaimarthyam, purpose and rationale of any given technique or practice or concept or theory or argument. And Sankshepartha Vistaraha, expanding wherever there is terse or brief mention, the commentary literature expands it for us. And then Shastra Itihasa Spashtata. So the commentators are, they say that generally in Indian culture or Indian tradition, we have the history sense on the history quotient is lesser. But when we get into the commentary, we clearly understand how the history or the Paurva Parya, the flow of arguments and thoughts. So that becomes clear only when we look into the commentaries. The commentators take care of the history aspect also. Apratipatti Nivaranam, removing lack of understanding or confusing concepts, just like Prayatna Shaithilya, just we saw. And Drishtantopadanena Vishadikaranam, using analogies to explain. And then Sandeha Nivrittaye Vaishishtya Pradarshanam, clarifying doubts by showing significance or relevance of any given point. And Nana Paksha Parichayaha, Siddhantasya Dridhatartham, on any given point, presenting various perspectives for firmness of understanding. So in this way, so the work that I did for that particular talk was focusing on only the Ashtanga Yoga part and only on one commentary. So based on one commentary, so many possibilities, or 10 prayojanas, or the utility of the commentaries we can see. I'm just skipping the examples. Maybe, so for each of this, I have illustration and quotations to explain. So I'll just skip this and then move to the next, but just I'll just mention one example here. Maybe of these 10, I'll just present one. Introducing various viewpoints. When we look into the commentaries, we get to know the various perspectives on any given topic. In the Pratyahara Sutra, in the Sutra on Pratyahara in Ashtanga Yoga, this point comes, Nana Paksha Parichayaha. So what is Pratyahara? The general Sutra says it is the control over the senses. So when we say or chittasya swarupānukāra iva indriyanam pratyaharaha, when the senses are completely subordinating themselves to the activity of the mind, then we call it as pratyahara. This is what Patanjali says. To that, in Vyasa Bhashya we see there are various understandings of pratyahara which is given. He says Shastra Viruddha Pratipattir Nyaya. So Pratyahara, there are 4 possible interpretations. He says following the injunctions of Shastra and allowing the senses to touch or get into touch with the objects of the senses as permitted by the Shastra. That is Pratyahara. Can we take it? Or Shabdadi Samprayogaha Swechaya Ityanye. So, the senses getting into touch with the respective objects, not because we are, or not because a person is addicted or he is not under control. Rather, so getting into touch with the objects at one's own will, not being drawn by the senses, being in full control of oneself, experiencing the sense pleasures. Can that be called as Pratyahara? Or there is a third interpretation, Raga Dvesha Bhave Sukha Dukha Shunyam Shabdadi Jnanam Indriyanam Iti Kechit. So, no pulling back, no disconnecting of the senses with their respective objects. Let that keep going on. But at the level of mind, I don't have raga and dvesha. So all those kleshas are not there. So without having kleshas, experiencing the objects of the senses, can that be called as pratyahara? So many ideas. So sense object contact as permitted by the Shastra, sense object contact on one's own will and not being dictated by the attraction of the objects. Third one, sense object contact bereft of raga dvesha. Or the final point is chittaikagryata chittaikagryat apratipattireva chittaikagryat apratipattireveti jaigishavyah chitta aikagryat apratipattihi. The mind attaining ekagrata and the senses and the objects, they are being disconnected. This is the view of Jaigishavya, and that is acceptable. So here we see that so many possibilities of interpretation to Pratyahara is given, and the final view of the Jaigishavya, a sage Jaigishavya is given, which is acceptable to Vyasa also. So here, thus we see that it is not simple dictation or simple word meaning explanation that we have in the commentaries. We see the commentaries presenting various possible interpretation also. So of the 10 points that I mentioned, I just illustrated one. So I'll just finish my final slides quickly, wrap it up quickly. I know I'm just exceeding the time. So currently the problems and the desideratum is in certain yoga courses themselves, we don't find Yoga Sutra, and wherever Yoga Sutra is studied, the commentaries are very mentioned in very brief or not at all mentioned. Or even in universities which are dedicated to yoga, no certificate programs or workshops or special study groups are there. And then when we come to the textual study and research, which caters to looking into the textual aspects of yoga, there are only a few institutes in the whole country, like the Kaivalya Dhama or Kupuswami Shastra Research Institute, my own institution, Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. But textual studies are happening abroad very well, but not in India. And then the lower criticism aspect of textual studies, especially the commentary studies, that is collecting the resources from the manuscript repositories, comparing them, arriving at a critical edition. That basic job of arriving at the ur text or the text as would have been composed by the original commentator, that basic job itself is yet to be done for so many commentaries. Like for Vyasa Bhashya, only 1 or 2 chapters have been done. The Yoga Sutras themselves have not been, to my knowledge, critically edited. And after this lower criticism comes the higher criticism of the contribution of each of these commentaries individually and also collectively towards understanding yoga philosophy and practice. That is also hugely lacking. And of course, translation of these commentary literature into regional languages to enhance the access of it across the countries without the language barrier. So these are the desideratums and problems in the field, but not all hope is lost. But there is quite some substantial work which have happened. For example, this work of Vimala Karnatak in 1974, there is a comparative study of 15 commentaries, so which brings in inputs from 15 commentaries on 6 ideas of yoga philosophy, on Chaturvyuha, Parinama, Ishvara, Sharira Vijnana and Bhuvana Vijnana. And there is a, for those who are interested in this, there is a huge bibliography of about 925 papers and publications on yoga philosophy by Karl Potter as part of the Encyclopedia of Indian Philosophy volume. They have compiled about 925 papers. This is also another very useful resource for anyone interested in this field. And then the translations in recent times by Professor T.S. Rukmani of Yoga Sutra Bhashya Vivarana, Yoga Vartika are very beautiful starting points for anyone who wish to commence work in this direction. And there is a concordance of Yoga Sutra and Vyasa Bhashya by Bhagavan Das. And then our work in this field from Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, in this field of commentary literature, we worked on Yoga Vaisharadi, a searchable web repository for classical Yoga Sutra commentaries, where we have brought together 14 commentaries of Yoga Sutra and 1 commentary of Hatha Yoga Pradipika. So you can see, so this is the web repository, Yoga Vaisharadi. So all these commentaries, so these are the 3 basic texts which are very central to yoga philosophy: Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Sutras and Hatha Yoga Pradipika. There are websites on Bhagavad Gita, but on Yoga Sutras and Hatha Yoga Pradipika presenting the searchable digital text, it's not available. So here around 14 texts have been searchably digitized, and these texts can be read in Devanagari, a Roman transliteration, or Kannada script, or Bengali script, or Tamil transliteration is also possible. And for Vyasa Bhashya, there is a audio rendering of it also. It is an attempt to make the Vyasa Bhashya more accessible. The language should not be a barrier. So the text audio book for Vyasa Bhashya is also given, and there is a search facility also. The principal text can be searched, or the commentaries can be searched, or the sub-commentaries can be searched. Search can happen both in Devanagari or in Roman transliteration. A soft keyboard is also given in Yoga Vaisharadi. And this is one work that we are doing, that we have done, and we are we are still refining the work. It is already available for study, research, all researchers and scholars, and some more additions and refinements are also going on in Yoga Vaisharadi. Apart from that, as I mentioned earlier, the work focus, especially that I have chosen or have, is bringing in the collective wisdom of commentaries as useful to the current day practice of yoga. So based on traditional Samskrita commentaries, ideas, and so 7 papers especially have been published on this topic of collective wisdom of Yoga Sutra commentaries. Ekatatvabhyasa, Nidra, interpretation of Nidra in Yoga Sutras, and then the concept of Vyadhi in Yoga Sutra, inputs from the traditional commentaries, and then the technique. I mentioned about Prayatna Shaithilya, Ananta Samapatti is another technique. They have been published as individual papers. And then another publication which is under evaluation is the why and how of Yoga Sutra commentary. So at least 100 papers should be there on the consolidated wisdom of Yoga Sutras, which will bring to light or so many hitherto unexplored ideas, which will be very useful to the contemporary society. I just finally finish off with a quotation again from Vyasa Bhashya. I began from Vyasa Bhashya, I end with Vyasa Bhashya. Everyone would want some value addition in their activity. So you are all here in this conference or listening to the talk. So some value addition is needed. Vyasa is very well aware of that value addition. Everyone would want to move from yoga to Uttama Yoga, yoga to better yoga or best yoga. So for that, he prescribes 3 tools. He says in Sutra, as part of the Ritambhara Prajna Sutra, Vyasa says, Agamena, Anumanena, Dhyanabhyasa Rasena cha, Tridha Prakalpayan Prajnam, Labhate Yogam Uttamam. How to make your yoga Uttama Yoga, how to make your yoga best yoga. He says, one ingredient is Agama, textual study, the Swadhyaya that I mentioned earlier, understanding various yogic concepts and principles and the reason behind it. And then anumana, and then reflecting upon it, thinking you, so receiving the knowledge and then using one's own inferential, analytical, contemplative capabilities to assimilate that knowledge. That is the second. And third one is abhyasa rasa, that is experiencing joy in practicing what has been learned and assimilated. So this will make yoga into Uttama yoga. And the very first step there is agama, studying or having a very good basis or of learning of yoga, yoga literature, yoga philosophy, and yogic concepts and tenets. So to that, contributing towards that very first step in the progress of yoga to make it Uttama yoga is where the contribution of the traditional Yoga Sutra commentaries are. With that note, I would like to conclude my talk.
Thank you so much, Jayaramanji, for your insightful talk, and I'm sure that we are so much enlightened by your session that we will try our best to reach Uttam Yoga from yoga by taking cues from your session. So we have got many questions from the participants, but we have the limitation of time, so we won't be able to take all the questions, but we will communicate few most relevant questions to you. The first, so I will read out all the questions and you may choose which one to answer. One question we have got is, which book of Yoga Sutra commentary would you recommend for beginners or those who are beginning with their research? Then there is one more question asking that few scholars state that there are 195 verses, whereas some refer to 196 verses. So why is this difference? That is another question.
Yeah.
Then yeah,
I'll take the first question first. It's a very brief answer only. I'll briefly answer each of these questions. The best commentary to begin with is the commentary of Sadashiva Brahmendra. It's a very lucid, simple commentary to Yoga Sutra. Whereas Vyasa's commentary is to be consulted after progressing to some extent. The basic commentary is Yoga Sudhakara, the nectar of yoga, commentary by Sadashiva Brahmendra, 18th century scholar. The translation of this commentary is available in English and also in Tamil also. So that's a good starting point into Yoga Sutra literature. And regarding the variation in the number of Yoga Sutras, certain sutras are split in certain versions, and certain sutras are given as one single sutra. Arishtebhyova, I think in third chapter, a sutra is split into two. So if it is split into two, then the number increases. If it is considered as one sutra, the number decreases. So anywhere between 194 to 196 is the number of sutras.
Okay. Thank you, sir. One more question, that you referred to some subhashits in Sanskrit when you were giving example of interpreting pratyahar. So there was a question that what is the source of these Sanskrit subhashit? If you can share, it would be great.
Actually, I didn't refer to any subhashita. It was the sentences from the commentaries itself. So the very last sutra of the second chapter of Yoga Sutra contains all the materials all the quotes that I gave. Okay. Which you can access from Yoga Vaisharadi.
Okay. One last question for it, that how one can select the commentary or how to determine the appropriateness of the commentary, because as you discussed that there are few issues with the commentaries. So how we can determine the appropriateness or aptness of the commentary?
Can you repeat the question once again? There was a small gap in my listening.
So the question was that how we can select the appropriate commentary to interpret Yoga Sutra, or as now we are pretty convinced that going through the commentary is much required to understand the sutras in a better manner. So how to determine the appropriateness, because there are some impurities with some commentaries.
I'm not very. I don't think impurities with the commentaries. The basic criteria that one should apply for looking at the quality of the commentary is, the first point is only two criteria. One is whether the commentary is whether the commentary respects the grammatical frameworks. That is the first point. Is it
Okay.
according to the grammatical framework? See, grammar, when we come to Samskrita, the first disciplining that any scholar undergoes is the discipline of using a precise, correct language. If the usages, interpretations are grammatically correct, so that is, and the sutras, as I mentioned, for Prayatna Shaithilya, it is Tritiya Vibhakti Dvivachana. So has it been grammatically correctly interpreted? So that is the first test. And second one is contextual appropriateness, whether it is according to the flow of the thought of the original source. See, the definition of bhashya itself is sutrastham padamadaya padaihi sutranukaribihi swapadani cha vyachaste bhashyam bhashyavido viduh. To evaluate any commentary, first one is the commentator should be faithful to the source text. Sutra Tham Padam. Those words have to be taken. And then he should not put in his own words or thoughts at the very outset. So he should first base his thoughts, or he should first try to explain the Sutrastha Pada, the words in the Sutra. He has to give the meaning of it. And then Padaihi Sutranukaribihi. He has to explain that Sutrastha Pada in consonance to the context. Number two, the second tool, so which also incorporates the grammatical appropriateness. The second thing is Swapadanicha Vyachaste. The commentator should be mindful also to see that he clarifies his own interpretation properly. He again does not create another confusion. So based on his interpretation. So two-level interpretation, clarifying what the original source text says, and then clarifying his own statements so that no ambiguity remains. So this is how we evaluate a commentary based on the traditional definitions of a commentary itself.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for sharing these insights. One last request from all our participants, that if you could share the bibliography and references which you referred in your presentation, and if you can share the link of Yoga Vaishyara, the repository, maybe in the chat box if possible, it will be very helpful. And I thank you once again from the Yogast Club, from IIT, and from all our participants for sharing your insights and enlightening us upon how to reflect upon the commentaries. Thank you so once again. And may I invite Aditya ji to take over for the next session and to introduce our next esteemed speaker. Thank you so much. Over to you, Aditya ji.
Okay.